Hi, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Leigh Haynes. I'm from Southeast Texas. I grew up near Jasper in Holly Springs. I went to Newton High School. And now I'm a lawyer. I work in public health. I work with groups around the world who advocate for social justice and health equity to make sure that everyone has the healthcare and medicines that they need to be healthy. So it's been really important for me to follow the development of this pandemic and also vaccines very closely, just to make sure that everybody can be able to have access to not just a vaccine, but a vaccine that is safe and that is effective. But when I first started hearing about this new virus, that it evolved into a pandemic and that we would probably need some sort of new treatment or medicine to get the pandemic under control, I felt a little hopeless. And then news about how fast we needed a vaccine and that the government was involved in trying to speed up the process to make the vaccine had me a little nervous. And then on top of that, the president said a lot of things that were not true about the pandemic. I was worried that he would try to influence the process so that drug companies would put out a vaccine before it was ready and proven to be safe and effective. And then just generally speaking, I should say historically speaking, and not only thinking about the current moment, there have been a lot of problems with the government and the medical field, especially for Black people and people of color. And what first comes to mind for me is the Tuskegee experiment on Black men, and also thinking about Henrietta Lacks. And there's also just a long history of racism, even in healthcare. We still experience it now going to the doctor or to the hospital. These were the things that were on my mind. And I found it hard to trust our government and the drug companies. As all of this was happening, as I had these thoughts on my mind, as I, was following the pandemic and the vaccine development, doing my work, I did a lot of research. I talked to a lot of people, and based on what I've learned, I'm sure that the vaccine is safe and that it is the best way for us to keep ourselves safe to get out of this pandemic. And I'll be taking the vaccine whenever my turn comes. One of the big questions that we've all had is about how the vaccine was produced so fast. And there are a few reasons that happened. First, some people might remember the SARS outbreak in 2002 and then the MERS outbreak in 2012. Both of those were types of coronaviruses. Scientists have been working since then on vaccines for coronaviruses. They figured that if there was going to be a pandemic, that it would probably be one of these types of viruses. So by the time the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 came out, scientists had already laid the groundwork to understand what it would take to keep people safe from this sort of virus. And then another thing is that, this is an international health emergency. The whole world came together, scientists, pharmaceutical companies, government, to develop these vaccines. Governments from all over the world gave billions of dollars to many companies to finish developing vaccines. And it's important to know that money is usually the holdup in getting good medicine out to the public. So having all those resources meant that scientists and companies had what they needed to efficiently test vaccines as they normally would. And so just to say a little bit about the testing process, it's got 3 different phases. And so the first phase is just to test for safety. And then the second phase is usually with, 100 or so people, and it's to test for side effects to make sure that the immune system actually responds. And then the third phase, what we usually hear about in the news, is to see how well the vaccine actually works against the virus. And this is usually with thousands and thousands of people. And then, because so many people were catching COVID, it was easy to find people to be part of the test. And so it didn't take that much time to show that people who were getting the vaccines were actually protected from the virus. There's a long history of Black people and people of color not being at the table when these studies are going on, when decisions are being made about medicines. And so after this long history, a lot of effort went into making sure that everyone was represented. So on the research side, on the science side, doctors of color, Black doctors, I was proud to hear that doctors from Morehouse and from our HBCUs were running tests and reviewing data, making sure that our concerns were being taken into account. And then on the volunteer side, the people who were volunteering to take the vaccines during the test, those folks looked like us. And they reflected the makeup of the country: Black people, Latino people, men, women, and people with health problems like diabetes and lupus. And so finally, the FDA had to approve the vaccine. And in times of emergency, there are special rules in place to be able to get life-saving medicine to the public fast. The companies were able to use money from the government to make the vaccines so they would be ready as soon as they were approved. And that's not just for us in the US. Other governments in other countries have approved the vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna, and people all over the world are getting them right now. Another question we have is, what happens when you get the vaccine? The COVID-19 vaccines and that process of getting the vaccine is a lot like other vaccines that we have gotten. Most of the COVID-19 vaccines require 2 shots. This is just like the chickenpox vaccine and the measles vaccine. The first shot helps your immune system to learn about and to recognize the virus. And then that second shot helps build on the response that it learned from the first shot in order for your immune system to put up a strong fight if you are ever exposed to the virus. We also worry about side effects from the COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett led the research team at the National Institutes of Health that created the Moderna vaccines. And she gave a talk and spoke a little bit about what they saw as far as side effects. And I'm going to let her explain that.
Long-term side effects from vaccines are extremely, extremely rare. Actually, most vaccine, quote unquote, side effects happen within the first 2 months of the vaccine, which is why the FDA told these companies they couldn't even submit an EUA until they were 2 months into their phase 3 clinical trials and had that safety data through the 2-month mark. So I wanted to kind of make that very clear that generally speaking for vaccines, side effects are in the first 2 months. But what you should not be hypothesizing around is 3 years from now, will I have, I don't know, grown an extra toe or whatever it is that people might assume could happen, because that is an extremely rare. The data is I think, from my perspective, especially sitting on the outside of the phase 3 clinical trial, is looking extremely promising from the side effects. I think if there are any, healthcare workers or people in the community who might be engaging with people around the vaccine at the time of which it's being administered, I think it is actually very fair that we tell people that you might be tired and you might have a red arm or a swollen arm after getting the vaccine, and you probably will have a fever after getting the vaccine because your immune system is kicking in. But those things are not causes for concern at all. And those things dissipate within 48 hours after getting your vaccination. And then in about 2 weeks after you have your vaccination, you have 95% less chance of getting COVID disease and about 100% less chance of dying or getting severe COVID disease. And so that is what is important.
I just want to make the point and be very clear that every now and then, and this is very rarely, people have had allergic reactions to the vaccine. But that happens right after you get it, like within 15 minutes. And the medical staff at the place where you get your shot, they know what to do. So if you have a history of severe allergic reactions, for example, if you carry an EpiPen, be sure to tell the people where you go for the shot so they can watch you and be ready to respond if you have an allergic reaction. So what this means is that this vaccine is safe for almost everyone to get. You should get it even if you've had COVID already, and even if you get the flu shot. After you get the vaccine, you'll have protection from getting a bad case of the disease. You might not have any symptoms at all, and you might have some symptoms, but if you do, they won't progress to a severe case of the disease. Scientists aren't sure yet whether getting the vaccine stops the spread of the virus, so it's important to keep maintaining distance, wearing masks, and washing our hands to keep each other safe. I don't want to get this virus, and I don't want to see any of my family, friends, or my community suffering with it. Every time I get a call from one of my friends who've gotten the vaccine, I feel so much relief. And just the other day, my mom called to let me know that she'd gotten the vaccine, and I was overjoyed because now I know that the people who are close to me and the people who I love won't suffer, and I won't lose them to this virus. And so when my turn comes to get the vaccine, I'm going to get in line to get my shot. Thank you.